We'll start off with a story, an anecdote. We'll see as the class goes on why we share this anecdote as an opening. It's a famous story. There was once a couple that thank God had a baby. And they come to the rabbi. They need to see the rabbi ASAP, day before the bris. They come in, they tell the rabbi, we have a huge problem, we're fighting nonstop. The rabbi says, what do you mean? You just had a baby, mazel tov. He says, no, we're fighting. We're not sure what to name the child. So the rabbi asks the husband, what do you want to name the child? He says, I want to name the boy Moshe. The rabbi asks the wife, what do you want to name the child? Moshe. The rabbi says, well, what's the problem? You both want Moshe. She starts screaming, you don't understand. His grandfather was a chuligan, he was a thief. He was known as a gangster. I'm going to name my son Moshe after him. My grandfather was a rabbi, he was a very prominent person. I wanted to have Moshe carry his name. So the rabbi says, name him Moshe. Come back to me in 20 years. If he's a chuligan, he's named after his grandfather. If he's a nice, appropriate person, he's named after your grandfather. We'll soon see why we share this story. But just on a side note, talking about naming. Naming a child, by the way, is something that it says a prophecy is given to the parents. And therefore the grandparents are not supposed to get involved. If they want to make a suggestion, they could do it and move out. Not make big demands. And a lot of times, I can tell you as a rabbi, I have many times people coming to me with issues that the grandparents want to name the child in a certain way and they want to name it different. According to Jewish law, the rights to name a child is given to the parents. And they're the ones that have the prophecy. Anyways, let's get back to our class. Talking about naming, we're going to learn something today. We're going to see that there's a debate who someone came from. Who is the great-grandparents? And we're going to see, does it make a difference? Does it not make a difference? Today is the 20th day of the month of Av, Chof Av. The 20th day of Av is the day that the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Leib, passed away. He was a great rabbi. He was a rabbi in a city at the time was called Yekaterinoslav in Ukraine. Today it's called the city of Dnieper. And he was a chief rabbi. But because he did not do what the communists wanted from him, they exiled him to Kazakhstan. Terrible, terrible conditions. And sadly, he passed away there at a relatively very young age. And he's buried in the city of Almaty. And many, many people were there over the last 24 hours. People flew in from all over the world to pray by his holy resting place. It was on this day that the Rebbe would make many times a farbrengen, a get-together. And the Rebbe discussed something fascinating that has a lesson for each and every one of us. The Rebbe said as following. There's only once in the Talmud that the date 20th of Av, Chof Av, is mentioned in the Talmud. Now let me be clear. Most days of the year are not mentioned in the Talmud. Most days of the year is just a regular day. If it's a holiday, it's mentioned in the Talmud. The 20th Av is a regular day. So I'm going to give you the story, what it says in the Talmud, why it's mentioned. And after that, we're going to ask a few questions on the story, and we're going to give an unbelievable, fascinating lesson that each and every one of us can learn from this. It says in Tractate of Tainus, it says as following. Yom Chof Av, the day of the 20th of Av, hoyechag b'mishpacha mesuyamet. It was a holiday for a certain family. Mishum because, shebiyom zeh, on this day, hishtatfu be'etzim shelahem agab b'mizbech beit hamikdash. On this day, they would use the wood that they donated to the temple. Now, let me give you a little bit of a history. In the temple, there were sacrifices brought every single day. There was one in the morning brought on behalf of all the Jewish people. That's when we pray Shacharit, the morning prayer. In the afternoon, before the sun set, there was another sacrifice that was brought. That's when we pray Mincha. But throughout the day, most of the day, private individuals would bring their sacrifices. People sinned, and every time you sinned, you had to bring a sacrifice, a way of atonement, for all different types of reasons. In order for a person to be able to bring a sacrifice, you had to have wood. If there's no wood, you're not going to have a fire. Now, a little bit of history. We all know there was two temples. There was the first temple that stood. The Jews went into exile for 70 years. and then they were granted permission to rebuild the temple. They came back to Yerushalayim, they came back to Jerusalem. When they came back, very few Jews came back. The majority of the Jews did not come back. And those that came back were extremely poor. And the temple was only built properly many years later. Was it expanded and it was made into a beautiful, beautiful sanctuary. But in the beginning, it was not. And there was no money. So a few families got together, and on different dates, they donated wood for the temple. Now, in the temple, there was a lishka, there was a certain chamber which was called lishkat ha'etzim. It was a special chamber where they kept the wood throughout. So to make sure that there's always inventory, a few families stepped up to the plate and they donated the wood. As the years went on, people became wealthy again, and other people wanted to have the merit of making the donation. But those families that made the donation in a very difficult time, they were the ones that still had the merit to donate wood to the temple. And when that family would bring the wood to the temple, it was a tremendous celebration for the family. Who was this family that donated the wood on the 20th day of Av? That by them the excitement was great. So the Talmud tells us there's two opinions. Number one, Rameir says, Hein b'nei David ben Yehuda. Who is this family? They're descendants of King David. Of David, the son of Yehuda, which also comes from King David. Rabbi Yoav ben Suri. Rabbi Yasi says they were the descendants of Yoav, the son of Tzeruiah. Now, it was a different family. Yoav, the son of Tzeruiah. They were descendants of him. So a few questions. Number one, how is it possible to argue on a fact? It's either they came from this family or they came from that family. Which family was it from? How could it be? Second of all, do we really have to argue about everything? I know, Jewish people, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Here we're talking about who donated wood to the temple on a certain day, the 20th day of Av. Do we really have to argue about that? Now, we have another rule. Whenever there's 2 opinions, we know Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, which means both opinions have merit in Jewish law, even though the law is only like one. So the question is, what merit do we have in this case where some say the family that donated the wood was from this family, from descendants of David? Another one said it was from the family of Yoav. What difference does it make? What lesson could we possibly learn from this? There's another question that's asked, which I'll get to at the end. But for now, the Rebbe says as following. The argument over here between Rameir and Rabbi Yossi, if he came from King David, the family came from King David or from Yoav, is not an argument in the facts, who they were from. We're both talking about the same exact family, which had roots that came from King David, and they also had roots that came from Yoav. We'll see in a second who they both were. The question is, which one of these families, of these ancestors, had the merit and the importance to give over something unique in the genes to their children, that they merited to be the ones that gave the wood to the temple on the 20th of Av? So who was King David? We all know. King David was the second king of the Jewish people. There was Shaul HaMelech, and then there was King David. Who was Yoav? Yoav was actually his nephew, his sister's child. Yoav was the head of the army. So King David was the king, the one that studied many Torah, and Yoav took care of all of the wars. These who these 2 people were. And again, obviously, the family intermarried, they're related anyways, and from this came this family that donated the wood on the 20th day of the month of Av. And the question we ask over here is a very simple question. Who was more important? Was it King David or was it Yoav? What is more important? Our rabbis tell us as following in the Talmud. If not for Yoav, who led all the wars, King David wouldn't be able to study Torah. But at the same time, the Talmud says, if it was not for King David, Yoav wouldn't be successful in his wars. So they both had to have each other. David, in a sense, King David, David HaMelech, was more abstract, not so involved in the worldly matters, the wars and so on and so forth. That was done by Yoav. So King David is more removed, and Yoav was obviously involved in day-to-day wars and everything else that took place. Now, what was so unique about donating wood on the 20th of Av? So the Talmud tells us as following. We mentioned this in Shabbat as well. On the 15th day of the month of Av, the sun becomes weaker. And because the sun becomes weaker, any wood that was cut after this day was not fit to be used in the Holy Temple. Because there's going to be more moisture in the logs, and in order for the wood to be used in the temple, you were not allowed to have any worms inside them. If there's worms in them, it was unfit to be used. So you couldn't just go down the block to your local gas station and pick up a bag of wood and throw it on the Temple Mount, throw it on the temple, on the altar, and make a fire. It had to be wood that was cut when it was very, very, very dry outside. So there was no opportunity for rain to get in there. And even then, they examined the wood to make sure that no worms got into there. So after the 15th day of Av, any wood that was cut afterwards was not fit for the temple. So up until the 15th day of Av, if a person donated wood, kol hakavod, it's very nice. But he was able to go and cut for himself more wood and replenish it, no problem. If someone made a donation of wood on the 20th of Av, he's giving away something that he can't just replace. These great wood that's dry, he can't replace it anymore. It's not the same. So what was unique about the people that donated wood on the 20th of Av? They gave away something that they cannot replace. They have to wait a whole year, but presently they can't replace it. And again, wood was a commodity. Wood was a real commodity, like we mentioned in the story of the Talmud, where it discusses the destruction of the temple. Tisha B'Av, the Talmud discusses there were three very, very wealthy people in Jerusalem. They were able to support Jerusalem for many years. One had a tremendous amount of wheat and barley. One had a tremendous amount of wine and oil. And one had a tremendous amount of wood. And each one said, I have enough to support all the people in Jerusalem for many, many years. The rabbi said they praised the one that said he's going to donate the wood. Because for every little piece of barley that you're going to put together to make a loaf of bread, you have to have a crazy amount more pieces of wood in order to have the fire going. So we don't understand that. We don't appreciate that. Today you walk in the house, you put on the gas stove, and that's it, you're good to go. But when you have to actually push the piece of wood inside, it goes out very, 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 very quickly. You make a bonfire, you see how fast it goes. And many people that have a banya, a sauna, that they have in front of their house, in front of the cottage, and they in order for them to be on for a few hours, they're constantly putting in wood. Can you imagine what they needed to have in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, where the fire burnt throughout the entire day? It was a tremendous amount of wood. You're not bringing a little bag. So those that gave away wood, they gave away something that they cannot replenish at the time, at least this quality of wood. More than that, the majority of the wood was for sacrifices that were brought throughout the day. Most of those sacrifices were for people that sinned. So a person is taking away something that they own, something that's precious, something you can't just get. They're donating it to the temple. And who is it for? Who are they donating it for? For sinners. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable type of personality. More than that, there's no honor. when you build a building, it says, oh, this guy built the building. Or this guy built the menorah. Someone that donates wood, they're not putting a plaque on the wood. Not that there was plaques in the temple. But no one's going around and saying, oh, who donated the wood today for all the sacrifice to be brought? It was shashtil. It wasn't something that was there to get honor. They did it because it was the right thing to be done. It hurt them financially. They weren't able to replenish it. They were doing it not for themselves, but they were doing it mainly for sinners. And there was no honor involved. They only did it for the reason that it's the right thing that has to be done. So we understand that the people that did that were very, 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 very devoted and very, 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 very humble. And they did it because this is what the right thing is to do. So the question is, where did that come from? Which genes did that come from? Was it because of the Torah study coming from King David? Or was it for Yoav, who went out to fight the wars for others? Now, they both did things that took from themselves. King David studied. You have to be completely devoted to study day in, day out, and not concern yourself with other worldly matters. And obviously, to fight the battles, you have to be completely devoted because you can give up your own life in order to protect another person. So the question is, the two rabbis are arguing which gene was the one that mattered. They came from both of them. But which one was the prominent, which one was the one that was more, what's the word? Not prominent, no, more dominant, thank you. Which one was more dominant? Which one was the one is because of this one that they had unbelievable genes. And that's where the discussion becomes. So now, before we go further, I'm going to explain something interesting. And that is that we find among the tribes, there were also two brothers. One was named Yisachar, and one's name is Zvulun. Yisachar's sat and studied Torah. Their brother Zvulun and his family were tremendous business people. They were living on the boats. They were importing and exporting. It's the first ones that were in that business. So they supported the brother Yisachar. The only way Yisachar was able to study Torah is because they had their brother supporting them. Now it's interesting. When it comes the time to give the blessings in the Torah, we find that the blessing was first given to Zvulun and only then to Yisachar. Zvulun was not the Torah scholars, but they were the supporters. They were the ones that enabled their brother's family, Yisachar, the tribe of Yisachar, to study Torah. And because of that, they're mentioned the blessing first, although Yisachar was older. Every time when we pick up the Torah, we lift the Torah, we say, after we say V'zot Torah, we say, Eitz chayim hi l'ma chazikim ba. Let's translate the words. Torah is a tree of life to those who hold on to it. So it says that in order to hold on to the Torah, you have to have both things. You have to have the one that studies, and then you also have to have the one that enables the person to study Torah. These two go hand in hand. And this is the reality of life. If it wasn't for Zvulun, you would not have Yisachar. Let's go back to what the Rebbe says about King David and Yoav, the one that ran all of his wars. I'll go straight to the English. This was the case of the time of David. The role was to engage in Torah study, prayer, and Psalms. David HaMelech wrote Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms. While Yoav, the son of Tzuriah, led the army. Both roles were essential. Right? That's a fact. You need both of them. As the Talmud says, we mentioned it before, if not for David, Yoav would not have succeeded in the war. And if not for Yoav, David cannot have studied the Torah. Perhaps we wouldn't have the book of Tehillim that we have today. Simply put, Yoav could not have had any valid claim to act on his own without the declares that the land of Israel, the Holy Land, belongs to the Holy Nation. David's Torah alone was not enough either, because Hashem desires the world to run in a natural manner. Therefore, it's necessary for Yoav to command the army, take up weapons, and fight Hashem's battles. So we know that military strength is very important. We also have to have the Torah. You cannot have one without the other. But, in a certain sense, those that fight are even more precious than those that study Torah, because without them you cannot have it. Similar to without Yisachar, without Zvulun, you won't have Yisachar. It's interesting. That's what it says. But we have to know that you have to have both of them. You cannot have one without the other. It's impossible to have one without the other. You have to have the Torah values, and you have to have all that strong, and you also have to have the army. And the two rabbis were explaining that each one was trying to figure out which one is the dominant one, which one was the most important. But again, we're talking about the same family. Now, what we see from all of this is something very unique. How does it relate to each and every one of us? What's the lesson for us? There are many times that a person goes out of his way to do something for God, but he has a certain benefit for himself. I'm praying, I'm studying Torah. When a person brought a sacrifice in the temple, even as a donation, he felt good. I did something positive. But there are certain things that a person does, a Jew does, that there's no credit for it. There's no recognition. No one knows. And he personally has no gain out of it. 0.0. So a person could say, I have no problem doing things, but I wanted to go for a sacrifice. I wanted to go something holy. I'm here to go help sinners. So the Torah tells us what was unique about the 20th day of Av. This family was such a great family. They were so unique that they donated wood when it was difficult. The people that didn't need it. The people that were sinners. To teach us a lesson that we don't only do things when we have personal gain. We have to do things because it's the right thing. And the lesson here is tremendous, tremendous, tremendous. And that's something that we all can learn from. Something that we all have to learn from. Now, the Rebbe once shared a story about a farbrengen. The Rebbe did not mention the name, but everyone knew who the Rebbe was talking about. This was Mendel Futefas. He was a great chassid who was sent to the gulags in Siberia for many years. Right before he was arrested, he managed to have his wife and children leave Russia with Polish papers. This was in the 40s, after the war. But he was there helping Jews leave, and he got stuck and he got caught, and he was sent to prison for many years. He had unbelievable stories how he survived, many things he learned while he was in prison. Unbelievable things. Literally unbelievable things. I'll just share one of the stories. He wrote, there's many books written on different stories that he would share by Hasidic farbrengens. There was once, when he was sitting there, the people in his barrack would like to play cards, and it was illegal to have cards. So the police, the officer, wherever was there, would come in and would make everyone stand against the wall, and they would go through everyone's pockets, and they would look and look and look and look and look, and the guy couldn't find it. He couldn't find it. And as they left, one guy always had a stack of cards. And Ramendel couldn't figure out the trick. So Ramendel, he was friendly with all these hooligans that were sitting in prison. He was sitting there for helping people. There was other people sitting there for other reasons. So he asked this guy, like, what's the trick? Like, how do you do it? Like, I don't see where you hide it. Like, you know what I mean? There's no holes in the ceiling. There's nothing here. I mean, we live in the barrack. I know where it is. And they take everything apart. How is it possible that you don't get caught? He says, it's very simple. I'll tell you the trick, but I trust you. You won't say anything. He says, I was a professional pickpocketer. In Russia, I was a professional pickpocketer. What I do is, as soon as the officer comes in, I have the stack of cards, and I put it in his pocket. He has no clue. He's looking around everywhere. And as he's about to leave, I'm a professional picker. I pick it out. He can't even feel it. No, he can't even feel it. So Mendel would always say, many times we look everywhere else for the answers. All we have to do is look inside us. We have to look into our neshama, our soul. We have the unbelievable power to do what Hashem wants. Instead of looking at other places, let's look what the Torah tells us to do in our situations. Anyways, the Rebbe shared a story about Rebbe for this. It wasn't this story, it's another story. When he finally got out of prison, he ended up in a city in Ukraine called Chernovitz. Then there wasn't Russian Ukraine, it was one former Soviet Union. But the city was called Chernovitz. There was Jewish people living there, was Hasidim living there, so that's where he stayed. What did he do after he came out of jail? He made sure there was a yeshiva. And then he fundraised in order to fix the mikveh where the Jewish women of Chernovitz and the surrounding cities would come use, because there was problems with the mikveh. If the government found out that he was rebuilding the mikveh, right back to Siberia. So the Rebbe said by Ephraim, you have a Jew that finally gets out of prison, finally is able to do mitzvahs, put on tefillin, study Torah. He was a huge Torah scholar. Let him just sit in the shul and study Torah, or at home, study. He's finally out of prison. No. What is he getting involved in? To build a mikveh. And the Rebbe said something fascinating. He personally had zero gain. This was a mikveh for women. And his own wife was not in the country. She was in England at the time. He had no personal gain whatsoever. Not only had no personal gain, but he was putting his life in danger, only to help another Jew that he should be able to perform mitzvot. This is the message of the 20th of Av. A family went and donated wood when it was difficult, when there was no money. A time when they weren't able to replenish. Something that's not going to bring them any honor. Something that was there to serve people that were sinners. Because this is the right thing to do. To give yourself over in the greatest way possible. There's nothing greater than that. I'll just conclude something that I mentioned on Shabbat. And that is in the Talmud tells us, who was this family? They came from Moav. Now Moav, if you look at the Torah tells us one of the nations you're not allowed to marry is a man that comes from the family of Moav. Even if they convert, you're not allowed to marry them. Because of all the problems they made to the Jewish people. You have a family that's doing something good. You have to let you know they're coming from Moav. I mean, come on. You know, we had in this week's Torah portion. You're not allowed to be rude, not nice, to a convert. You have to go out of your way to be extra nice to a convert. You have to be nice to everyone, don't get me wrong. The reason why the Torah mentions it so many times is because that's the way people are. People don't have people to stick up for them. They don't have a family. They don't have, a big yichus. They don't have 135 cousins. So sometimes people start up with them. So the Torah warns you not allowed to do it. So over here, all of a sudden, the Talmud has to tell us they come from Moav. Just say they come from David of Yoav. Why you have to mention they come from Moav? So the Rebbe once mentioned Moav means they came from Rus. Who was Rus? There was a very wealthy man in the time of Israel. He lived in Israel. There was a tremendous drought. He crossed over the Jordan River. He lived in the place of Moav, today Jordan. Sadly, his 2 kids married locals. He died, and his 2 kids passed away. So his widow is now left with 2 daughter-in-laws. She tells them, it was nice knowing you. I'm going back to Israel. You go back home. Now, they weren't regular daughters. They came from families of the kings of Moab. And they said, we want to go with you. And she says, I have no money. I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. I don't know where I'm eating. Why would you do that? Go back and have a good life. And guess what? One makes a U-turn and goes back. Ruth says, no. Wherever you go, I go. Wherever you sleep, I sleep. Whatever you end up eating, I end up eating. And she comes back and she converts. And who comes from her? King David. So the Rebbe explains something fascinating. Where did someone get in their genes, in a time when people were poor, to go out of the way, to donate in a time when they cannot replenish, to give it to sinners, to do something with no honor? That came from their genes, Rus. Rus could have had all the honor if she would have went back home. She came from a family, of the royal family. There was wealth, but no. she decided this is the right thing to do, to go with her mother-in-law, to come close to God and to convert. Complete selfless dedication. Giving up her comforts of her life. Without any gains. She didn't do it because she's marrying someone. Her husband already died. She didn't do it because people are going to go around telling everyone, look what kind of great person this is. No one even knew who she was. She didn't do it for any gain. She didn't do it for any fame. She didn't do it for any money. She didn't do it to get married. She did it because it was the right thing to do and something that she wanted to do, and she did it selflessly. That was her genes that she gave over to her children. And because she gave it over to her children, they had that within them. That hundreds of years later, when the second temple is being rebuilt, they stood up to the plate. And they're the ones that brought the wood. And that's why the Talmud tells us the date that the wood is brought. And that's why the Talmud tells us there was a big joy by this family when they went and donated the wood. But most importantly, it's a message for each and every one of us. We shouldn't do things for our personal gain. We shouldn't do things for honor. When it's the right thing to be done, step up to the plate, although it's hard, and though it could, maybe at times it can hurt. If it's the right thing, that is the greatest way to live your life. And that's who the Rebbe's father was. He stood up to the Russian government. They told him, you're a respected rabbi among the entire former Soviet Union and even further. And we're using your name to write that the matzahs are kosher for Passover. He says, how could I say that? Only if I send in the rabbis that I trust as mashgichim to look over the plant. And they said, no. We need to sell the matzahs. We need to get it done. We're putting your name on there, that you supervised it. He says, I wasn't there when they cut the wheat. I wasn't at the bakery where they made it. I can't do that. And they told him, if you don't do that, you should know who you're starting up with. You're starting up with the government. We're putting your name. And he said, if you're going to put out a name, I'm going to have no choice. I'm going to have to write out a letter and send letters around the entire country to let people know that I never supervised this making of the matzah. I never saw the way they cut the wheat. Now, by the way, if you just want to know, when matzah is made, the process begins in the summer. They go out into the fields in the summer and they cut the wheat. So in Israel, it's very easy because it doesn't rain the entire summer. It doesn't rain in the summer. In other places in the world, the rabbis wait for it's a good few days for it that it's dry, so there's no wet in the kernels. It can never become chametz. And the rabbis themselves go down to these massive fields with their supervisors, and they pick a bunch of kernels, and they literally go through it to make sure if it's good or not, to make sure it's fine. So to write a letter that I give kosher supervision when I was never in the plant, I have no idea what's going on, and matzah has to be made within 18 minutes. If not, it's no good, and so on and so forth. There's so many things that could go wrong. I'm not going to do it. So he stood up selflessly to go ahead and do what has to get done because this is the right thing. Although he put his life in danger. And again, he was expelled for that and for other things, standing up for what's right. When a person lives their life with putting their own ego aside, that's the way they're going to be able to learn. That's the way they're going to live their life. I want to connect it also to this week's Torah portion. The name of this week's portion is Akev. You know what Akev means? What does Akev mean? A heel, very good. It's the only body part that has a name in the Torah. A portion of Torah, the only one that has after a body part is Akev. Akev means a heel. The name of this week's portion starts off, it's called Akev. It says, V'hoya Akev Tishmon. It will be when you're going to listen. But Akev means a heel. So rabbis tell us, if you really want to learn, the only way you're going to learn is if you're like a heel. What's a heel? A heel is something that everyone steps on. And it's quiet. It doesn't start screaming. Imagine you start stepping on your head. Start stepping on your elbow. The heel takes everything. It's complete humility. When a person has complete humility, then they can learn. When a person goes into class, I know it all, or let me ask a question already, what's being asked, and let me give an answer without listening what the person is saying, they're not going to be able to learn. And again, I'm talking about the concept of being selfless. It's not about me. But ultimately, when a person is selfless, they're great. They're getting the highest things possible. I'll just conclude. The Rebbe would talk for hours and hours and hours by a farbrengen on Shabbat. Insights into the Torah. From the weekly Torah portion to Kabbalah. The Rebbe would explain parts of Kabbalah based on his father's teachings. Ethics of our fathers. On the Talmud. The problem on Shabbat, not the problem, but the reality is on Shabbat you cannot record. So how is the world going to know everything that the Rebbe spoke? There's a few thousand people by the farbrengen, but there's people all around the world. And if you want to study it in a year from now, and 2 years from now, how is it going to go? So there were people, rabbis, that God blessed them with a phenomenal memory, and they also have to know how to learn. You have to understand what the Rebbe was talking about. You have to know the context, at least most of it, not everything. After Shabbat was over, they would sit and they would review the entire farbrengen. And this one would say, no, the Rebbe used this word, no, that word, the other way. This was the answer. That was the answer. And they would record it, write it up, type it. Sometimes the Rebbe would edit it, sometimes not. And sadly, we don't have from older years, but in later years it became a lot better. And that's how we have hundreds of volumes of the Rebbe's talk. So I heard from a number of those people that would be those that would review and give over the Rebbe's talks. They were called chozrim. Chozr means to review, to give over. Lachzor, give chazara, to repeat. Chazara means to repeat what was said. And they said, when you came to farbrengen, in order to remember hours and hours of the Rebbe's talk, the first thing you had to do is, you had to put your ego aside, concentrate to what the Rebbe is saying, and don't start thinking about answering or about questions. Just concentrate on what the Rebbe is saying for now. Later on, after you learn it and review it, then you can start adding your own things and start questioning or comparing and things like that. In order to receive the Rebbe's talk, that it should stay in my memory, I have to block everything out and focus on what's being said. That is Eikev Tishmon. When a person's like a heel, doesn't go around with a big ego, that's when they can learn the most. That's when they can accept the most from others. It's the concept of being selfless. That is the greatest thing. And we have to remember, true humility is respecting every person. True humility is not that everyone should know, oh, here's the humble guy. I'll conclude with a joke, with an anecdote. Back in the day, you didn't have showers in your house. You had to go to the bathhouse. In the bathhouse, there are people that sometimes would offer, I'll put the shampoo on you, I'll rub your back for you. So there was one guy in the city of Minsk, he was known as the Yoav of Minsk, the humble man of Minsk. And he'd walk into the bathhouse and he would tell people, let me do this thing for your back. Oh, God forbid, you're the Yoav of Minsk. I can't ask you to do it. You're such a holy person. And he'd go to every person, can I do it for you? And they would say, God forbid, you're the Minsker Yoav, you're the very famous man, the humble man of Minsk. One time a chassid came in there and he couldn't take it. This guy's so full of it. He loves to hear that everyone says he's the humble man of Minsk. So sure enough, he walked in and the guy asks him, can I put the shampoo? Can I rub your back? He goes, of course. He tells him in his ear, I'm the humble man of Minsk. He goes, a little more to the right. He tells him again, I'm the humble man of Minsk. To the left, to the bottom, to here. And he's telling him every 2 seconds, I'm the Yoav of Minsk. I'm the humble. He says, come on. You're so full of it. Get out of here. And the point is, true humility. It's not going around saying, oh, here's the humble guy coming. Everyone says he's the humble guy. Can I do it? And he has no care to help anyone. Real humility is what we start off with. This family giving the wood had nothing in it for themselves. Rabbi Leib, the Rebbe's father, had nothing in it for himself. He was there to stand up proud for the Jewish people. Although it meant that he was eventually exiled to Almaty. There's so much that we can learn from our soldiers. They're literally willing, and sadly many, giving up their lives. This is real selfless acts. There's so many things that we can learn from. So as we live in the comforts of our homes, with all the beautiful things that we have in this world, we have to remember that we also have to be selfless to what Hashem wants. And when a person is going to be selfless, that will bring us ultimately the ultimate blessings. And not just the ultimate blessing, but it will bring us the ultimate happiness. The Rabbi Leib, Rebbe's father, his wife, writes in a diary that the last Simchas Torah of his life, I think I mentioned on Shabbos, the last Simchas Torah of his life, he was alone. There was no shul where they sent him. Lived in a house, an apartment full of mice. The owner of the house was an anti-Semite, which was very nice to them. And it comes Simchas Torah. Rabbi Leivik's Simchas Torah was his highlight. He had the central shul in the city. Hundreds and thousands of people would come through the night. And he had a special nigunim, certain songs that he would sing. And he was standing on top, and he was running the Simchas Torah celebration. And people were coming over to him for blessings. And now Simchas Torah. He's in a home alone. There's no shul, there's nothing. And his wife was worried. Is he going to be depressed? What's going to be? Comes Simchas Torah night, and he gets up at the kitchen table as he's standing in front of hundreds of people. And he begins to say the verses that we say before we dance to the Torah. He starts to say all the verses that we say. And then he took his sefer that he had a few books with him. Those were the books that he was able to write. There was no paper. He was able to write on the margins of the paper. He was able to write tremendous Torah thoughts. Eventually came to America, and eventually the Rebbe printed it. His wife would go out to the field to get grass and berries in order to make ink. You take a look, it's on display at the Rebbe's library. For those that came to New York, you see different colors. Red, purple, blue on the same page. Whatever berries, whatever she was able to find, that's how she made ink. And that's how it survived. And he danced around the kitchen table. When a person is selfless and does what's right, they have inner peace. Doesn't mean it's easy, but there's no greater blessing than that. May God help each and every one of us that we should be able to do it. Good luck. All right. Yeah, they would promote. They wanted to show to the world that they're doing certain things. Now you have to be careful getting the right one. You're getting the right matzah. And it's kosher matzah, not just produced matzah. Right. So there were certain things that they did. They had a few shuls that were open. So when people would come from across the world, they would show them the shul, let's say in Moscow, for those that were in Moscow, they would show them the synagogue. Here's the big shul. And other cities as well, they had their official shul. But those shuls were very dangerous. There was masrim. Masrim means informers that were there. In later years, people wanted to make their own matzah, kosher matzah. They had to do it under the table. What's interesting is when you speak to a regular, typical Jew from Russia, the only thing that they remember, most Jews, is matzah. Everyone ate matzah on Pesach. They don't remember too much more. It's interesting. They remember two things, matzah on Pesach and Simchas Torah. Now, many Jews did not go to shul on Simchas Torah. They would stand outside the shul. There's a person in our community here. He met his wife standing outside of the shul. It was a big park outside of the chip of our shul, and thousands of people would come. They were scared to go in the shul. But Simchas Torah night, that's where they would all come. That's where all the Jews would hang out, just standing outside the shul. So Simchas Torah somehow lost it a bit when they came in North America. Somehow it got lost. But the matzah remained. The matzah till today. Every Jew knows they have to have proper matzah for Pesach. This is something that remains strong. This was probably from the only things that they remember. A typical family from Russia, what they remember is the matzah. The grandmother, the mother going to get the matzah, the uncles, it was a whole thing, how they're going to get the matzah. It's very, very interesting. This was something that stayed. This was one of the mitzvahs that stayed. But if you're getting matzah, you want to make sure you're getting matzah that are kosher for Pesach. You want not just someone that's making crackers, you know what I mean? And telling you we're packaged nice, that it's whatever way they packaged back in the day. This is what we're talking about in the 30s. Probably in the 30s, yeah. Late 20s, the 20s, 30s. It was before the World War. Yeah.